March 1945. Behind the barbed wire of Camp Ruston, Louisiana, 32 German women stood in formation, their backs straight, their eyes cold with contempt. They had watched American soldiers drill in the dust, and they had laughed. "Look at them," one whispered. "Farmers playing at war." But in 72 hours, something would shatter that laughter forever. They would witness a display of military precision so brutal, so utterly professional, that it would break not their bodies, but the iron ideology they had carried across an ocean. March 12, 1945, 14:37 hours, Camp Ruston, Louisiana. The truck stopped. Dust settled. 32 women climbed down. Oberaufseherin Margareta Hoffmann stepped onto American soil first. 43 years old. Berlin communications supervisor, widow of Stalingrad, mother to 2 sons buried in rubble. She straightened her spine and surveyed the compound. Young guards, farm faces. One was chewing gum. Another had his sleeves rolled up against regulations. "Schauen Sie," she said to the woman beside her. "Children in costumes." Helga Schneider nodded, 38, combat nurse from the Eastern Front to Normandy. She'd held men's hands as they died in frozen mud and burning sand. She'd seen Wehrmacht soldiers fight on empty stomachs with broken rifles, because orders were orders, and duty was everything. "Our men were warriors," Helga said quietly. "These boys look like they're waiting for lunch break." Behind them, Anna Reichert, 29, SS secretary, fluent in 4 languages, laughed. Sharp, cold. "They won with factories, not courage. Any fool can win when he has 10 tanks to your 1. The other women murmured agreement. It was easier that way. Easier to believe the cause was right, but the resources were wrong. Easier to preserve something when everything else had been taken. A young guard approached. Private James Cooper. 18. Ohio farm boy with a combat infantry badge earned at Bastonia. "This way, ladies." His German was terrible. "Follow me, please." Hoffman looked him up and down. "How old are you, boy?" Cooper's jaw tightened. "Old enough to have fought in the Bulge, ma'am." The Bulge. She smiled without warmth. "Where German soldiers held against 10 times their number until you broke them with artillery. Yes. Very heroic." Cooper said nothing. Orders were orders. He led them toward the barracks. Anna whispered to Petra Vogel, the youngest at 23. "Did you see his hands shake? They're all like that. Nervous. Undisciplined." "In Berlin, he would have been dismissed for improper uniform," Petra replied. They walked past a training field. American soldiers were running drills. Their formations were loose. One man stumbled. Another was breathing hard, face red. Helga shook her head. "In the Wehrmacht, that soldier would be on extra duty for a month." "In the Wehrmacht, that soldier would be dead," Anna corrected, "because fitness is survival, and they clearly don't understand that." The women laughed. Cooper heard it. Kept walking. Command post. 16:20 hours. Captain Robert Mitchell stood at the window. 31. Omaha Beach survivor. He'd crossed the Rhine. He'd seen Dachau. He knew exactly what these women represented. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison entered. 26. Stanford psychology degree. German speaker. She'd joined Army intelligence, believing she could help rebuild German minds after the war. 3 months in this job had taught her that some minds didn't want rebuilding. "They're settling in," she said. Mitchell didn't turn from the window. "They're laughing at our guards. They're protecting themselves. Their world collapsed. Everything they believed. I know the psychology, Lieutenant." Mitchell's voice was flat. "I want to know the solution." Morrison joined him at the window. Below, the German women were organizing themselves. Military precision. Hospital corners on bunks visible through the barracks windows. They moved like soldiers, talked like soldiers, thought like soldiers. "They believe they're superior," Morrison said. "Not just better trained, superior. In their minds, Germany didn't lose because German soldiers were worse. Germany lost because we had more stuff." Mitchell turned to face her. "I've heard this before. From Wehrmacht officers, SS men, Hitler Youth kids who couldn't shave yet, but would tell you all about Aryan supremacy while bleeding out in a ditch. So what do? Mitchell was quiet for a moment. We show them what real soldiers look like. They think they've already seen real soldiers. Then we show them again, better. March 15th, morning formation. The German women stood in ranks outside their barracks, self-organized, self-disciplined. They'd been doing this every morning since arrival. Hoffman called roll, Schneider, higher, Reichert, higher, Vogel, here. Down the list, 32 names, 32 women who had served the Reich in capacities that made them valuable to Allied intelligence. Secretaries who'd typed orders, nurses who'd treated SS officers, radio operators who'd transmitted Wehrmacht communications. Not criminals, not soldiers, but believers. After roll call, they watched the American training exercises. This had become routine, entertainment almost. A daily reminder that their belief in German superiority could survive even defeat. A platoon jogged past. One soldier was overweight. His breathing was labored. His face looked like a tomato. Anna pointed. Look at him. In Berlin, he would have been discharged in basic training. Americans don't believe in standards, Petra said. Everyone gets a medal. Everyone is special. No excellence, only equality. Helga frowned. That's not quite fair. Fair. Anna turned on her. Fair is what we gave the world. Order, discipline. The understanding that some people are meant to lead and others to follow. That's natural law. That's what lost us the war, Helga said quietly. Silence. Anna's eyes went cold. You think we lost because we were wrong. I think we lost because we lost. Helga looked away. What that means, I don't know anymore. March 18th. The fence. The women had discovered that the detention compound fence ran parallel to the main training field. They could watch everything, and they did. Private Marcus Freeman ran past. 23. Detroit. One of the few black soldiers assigned to Camp Rustin. He was running extra miles preparing for Pacific redeployment. The women watched. Ein Neger, someone said. A black man, Anna's voice carried. And they let him wear the uniform. The Americans truly have no standards. Freeman stopped, turned, walked to the fence. The women tensed, not from fear, from something else. Curiosity, maybe, or the instinct that something important was about to happen. Freeman looked directly at Hoffman. His German was slow but clear. Grandmother from Stuttgart taught him before she died. You know what's funny? He smiled without humor. I've been in your POW camps, Stalag VIA. You separated us from the white soldiers, put us in different barracks. Hoffman's expression didn't change. Guards told us stories, Freeman continued. Said when Germany won, all black people would be eliminated. Not imprisoned, not enslaved. Eliminated. They showed us photos. African civilians executed by German colonial troops. Said that was our future. He paused. Let the words breathe. I'm still here. Where's your Führer? Then he continued running. The women stood frozen. Petra's voice was small. He's lying. That's propaganda. We did. Helga's voice was hollow. I saw the orders. Eastern Front. Commissars and partisans were to be executed immediately. No trial. No mercy. And yes, special prisoners. Political. Racial. The orders were very specific about racial categories. That was war, Anna said quickly. War is ugly. Both sides. Both sides. Freeman's voice came back. He'd stopped again 20 yards down the fence. Lady, I've been in your camps and American camps. There's a difference. We feed our prisoners. You starved yours. We follow Geneva Convention. You used it for toilet paper. He walked back to the fence, looked at each woman in turn. You think you're better than us? You lost. You lost because you were worse. Not worse soldiers, worse people. You built death factories. You murdered children. You did evil and called it greatness. His voice dropped, became almost gentle. And the really sad thing most of you probably believe you didn't know, that you were just following orders, just serving your country, just doing your duty. Freeman shook his head. But you knew. You saw neighbors disappear. You saw the trains. You saw the smoke. You knew, and you chose not to know. That's not ignorance. That's cowardice. He walked away. This time, he didn't come back. Command post. That night. Mitchell reviewed incident reports. Morrison sat across from him drinking bad coffee. Freeman talked to them, Mitchell said. I heard. The guards reported it. And Morrison set down her cup. 3 of the women didn't eat dinner. Hoffman requested to speak with a chaplain. We don't have one available, but she asked. Petra Vogel was crying in the latrine. Anna Reichert organized a group singing session, old party songs, trying to shore up morale. So Freeman cracked something. Or reinforced it. Depends on the woman. Morrison rubbed her eyes. The true believers will dig in deeper. The doubters will start questioning. The ones in the middle, that's where the real battle is. Mitchell leaned back. The Rangers arrive in 4 days. Captain Chen's unit, they fought from Africa to Germany. I want to arrange an observation. An observation. Full training demonstration. Live fire. Explosives. Close quarters battle. Everything. Morrison was quiet. Then, that's risky. If they interpret it as intimidation, they'll interpret it as American military excellence. Mitchell's voice was firm. These women think discipline means parade grounds and synchronized marching. I want them to see what real soldiers look like when the job is killing and surviving, not looking pretty. When? May 8th. Morrison understood immediately. The day Germany surrenders. Symbolism matters. They'll learn their country died the same day they learn what killed it. March 25th. Weekly routine. The pattern solidified. The German women maintained their own military discipline. Morning formation, bunk inspections, evening roll call. They sang softly after lights out, not Nazi songs, but old folk songs from before the war. Songs their mothers had taught them, and they watched American soldiers train. Private Cooper walked past the fence during his patrol. The women were at the fence again, observing a platoon doing bayonet drills. Look at their form, Anna was saying. Sloppy, no precision. They're just stabbing the air. Cooper stopped. You speak English, right? Anna turned. Yes. Then let me tell you something. Cooper's voice was controlled, tight. That sloppy bayonet drill, I used it to kill 3 men in the Ardennes forest, close enough to smell them, close enough to see their eyes. He stepped closer to the fence. You think we're undisciplined? We won. You think we're weak. We're standing here and you're behind that wire. You think we're inferior. Lady, we liberated death camps your people built. We saw what your superior culture actually looked like when nobody was watching. Anna's face went white. We're not perfect, Cooper continued. We've got problems, racism, poverty, injustice. But we don't build factories to murder children. We don't invade our neighbors for living space. We don't tattoo numbers on people's arms. He turned to walk away, then stopped. One more thing. That fat soldier you laughed at yesterday, the one you said would be discharged in German basic, he stormed Omaha Beach. He's got 3 Purple Hearts. He's earned the right to be out of shape after what he did to free Europe from people like you. Cooper left. The women were silent. Finally, Helga spoke. He's right, you know. About what? Hoffman's voice was sharp. About all of it. Duh. April 15th. Morrison's interview. Morrison sat across from Hoffman in the makeshift interview room. Weekly psychological evaluations were mandatory. Most of the women treated them as interrogations to be endured. How are you adjusting? Morrison asked in German, as well as can be expected in captivity. You're not a POW. You're a detained civilian awaiting repatriation. The distinction seems academic from behind a fence. Morrison made a note. Tell me about Berlin, before the war. Hoffman's expression softened slightly. Beautiful, clean, orderly. There was a sense of purpose. Everyone knew their role. Everyone contributed. And the Jewish families, where did they fit in that order? The softness vanished. That's propaganda. We didn't know, Mrs. Hoffman. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. Your husband worked in Wehrmacht intelligence. You supervised government communications. You processed classified messages. You knew. Silence. I saw deportation notices, Morrison continued. I saw confiscation orders. I saw the bureaucratic paper trail of genocide, and it touched every level of German government. Secretaries typed it. Clerks filed it. Operators transmitted it. You couldn't work in government communications without seeing it. Hoffman's hands trembled. We were told they were being resettled, labor camps, for the war effort. Did you believe that? Long pause. I chose to believe it. Hoffman's voice cracked. Because the alternative was what? Was admitting I served evil. Tears now. Was admitting my husband died for evil. That my sons died for evil. That everything I believed, everything I built my life on was a lie. Morrison handed her a handkerchief. Waited. How do you live with that? Hoffman whispered. How do you wake up every day knowing you were part of something monstrous? I don't know, Morrison said honestly. But I think the first step is admitting it, not to me, to yourself. May 1st. Hitler's death announced. The women learned the news during evening formation. A guard posted a bulletin. Adolf Hitler dead in Berlin bunker. Suicide. April 30th. The reaction was complex. Some women cried. Others showed no emotion. Anna Reichert laughed high, brittle breaking. He abandoned us, she said. He said he would fight to the last breath, and he killed himself. She couldn't finish, collapsed into sobs. Petra held her. It's over. It's finally over. No. Hoffman's voice cut through. It's not over. The cause doesn't die with one man. The principles. What principles? Helga turned on her. Genocide conquest, ethnic cleansing. Which principle exactly are you planning to preserve? Order discipline. The understanding that civilization requires hierarchy requires murder. Helga's voice rose. Requires death camps. Margareta, I held men while they died. German men. Good men. Men who believed they were fighting for something noble. And they died for nothing. For lies. For a madman's fantasy. You don't know that. I know we lost, Helga was shouting now. I know we're prisoners. I know Hitler is dead and Germany is rubble and everything we believed was wrong. Guards moved toward the commotion. Mitchell watched from the command post. Let them fight, he told Morrison. They need to. In the compound, Hoffman and Helga faced each other. If we were wrong, Hoffman said quietly, then what was the point? What did my husband die for? What did my sons die for? Helga's voice broke. Nothing. They died for nothing, and we have to live with that. The women stood in the gathering darkness. Some were crying. Some were angry. Some were just empty. Anna's voice came out small. What do we believe now? No one answered. May 6th. Rangers arrive. 40 men. 4th Ranger Battalion. They'd fought from North Africa through Sicily, Anzio Normandy into Germany itself. They moved with economy. No wasted motion. No unnecessary talk. Captain David Chen reported to Mitchell. 33. Chinese American from San Francisco. He'd faced discrimination his entire life and responded by becoming excellent. You want us to run a full demonstration, Chen said. It wasn't a question. May 8th, the day Germany surrenders. I want them to see what beat them. Chen glanced toward the detention compound. They've been watching our regular troops, mocking them. I know. And you think seeing Rangers will change their minds. Mitchell met his eyes. I think seeing professionals who don't need to goose step to be effective might teach them something about real strength. Chen smiled slightly. We can do that. May 7th, the night before. The women knew something was different. Rangers had arrived. The compound was unusually active. Guards were more alert. In the barracks, they talked quietly. "They're planning something," Anna said. "A demonstration." Helga had overheard guards talking. "Military training. They want us to watch." "Why?" "To intimidate us." Anna's voice was certain. "To show us American power. To humiliate us." "Or," Petra said softly, "to show us what we couldn't see before." "What does that mean?" "It means..." Petra struggled for words. "It means maybe we were wrong. About everything." "You can't believe that." Anna grabbed her shoulders. "Petra, you can't let them break you. We were right. We had to be right. Germany was great. Germany was defeated." Hoffman's voice came from her bunk. Quiet. Resigned. And perhaps there was a reason. Silence in the barracks. Outside, Rangers conducted a night exercise. No shouting, no commands. No, just the soft sound of equipment and footsteps. Professional soldiers doing professional work. Anna whispered into the darkness. "What if we're wrong? What if everything we believed was a lie?" No one answered. But everyone was thinking it. Tomorrow they would see something that would answer that question forever. Tomorrow the last comfortable lie would die. Tomorrow they would learn what better actually meant. The morning of May 8th came with heat that pressed down like a hand. By 06:00 hours, the temperature had already climbed past 80 degrees. The German women woke to shouting outside their barracks, not angry but sharp, efficient. Ranger voices giving orders. Hoffman sat up first. Through the window she saw them assembling equipment. Ropes, climbing gear, wooden structures that looked like building facades, and weapons. Real weapons, not training replicas. "They're preparing something large," she said. Helga joined her at the window. "It looks like urban warfare training." "Urban warfare," Anna's voice came from across the room. "Against what? The war in Europe is over. Japan is an island." "Maybe they're preparing for occupation duty," Petra suggested. "Controlling German cities." The implication hung there. These men would walk the streets of Berlin, Munich, Hamburg. They would patrol the ruins of the Reich. They would be the visible proof of defeat every single day. At 07:30, a guard appeared. Corporal Williams, 25. Louisiana native who spoke no German, but had learned to read their expressions over the past 2 months. "Ladies, you've been authorized to observe today's training exercise. You'll be escorted to the observation area at 08:00. Dress appropriately for heat. Bring water. It's going to be a long day." After he left, the women looked at each other. "They want us to see this," Hoffman said slowly. "They specifically want us to watch." "Why?" Petra asked. "Because," Helga said quietly, "they want to teach us something." Anna laughed. What could they possibly teach us that we don't already know? That question would be answered in the next 6 hours. At 08:00, sharp guards escorted them to a shaded observation area on a hill overlooking the main training ground. Below them, perhaps 400 yards away, the Rangers had constructed what looked like a small village. Wooden buildings, fences, ditches, obstacles. Captain Mitchell was waiting. Lieutenant Morrison stood beside him. "Good morning," Mitchell said in German. His accent was rough but understandable. "What you're about to see is a standard Ranger training exercise. Live ammunition. Real explosives. This is how we prepare soldiers for combat. I want you to understand this is not a show. This is work." Hoffman met his eyes. "We've seen German soldiers train, Captain. We know what military excellence looks like." "Good," Mitchell said. "Then you'll appreciate what you're about to witness." He walked away. Morrison remained. "The exercise begins at 08:30. It will last approximately 3 hours. You're free to ask questions, but please remain in this area for safety. Some of the ordnance is live." "Ordnance?" Petra's voice wavered. "Explosives, grenades, breaching charges." Morrison's expression was neutral. "Like I said, this is real training, not theater." At EO 827, Captain Chen appeared below. 40 Rangers in full combat gear. They moved into position without fanfare. No marching, no synchronized movements. They simply went where they needed to be. Anna whispered, "They don't even march properly." Hoffman didn't respond. She was watching Chen. The way he moved, the way his men responded to hand signals without hesitation, the way they spaced themselves, not parade ground precision, but tactical distribution. 5 yards between men, covering angles, watching sectors. "That's not disorder," she said slowly. "That's different order." At 0830, exactly a whistle blew. The Rangers moved. What happened next shattered 32 women's understanding of military excellence. The first team hit the mock village at a dead sprint, not running flowing, like water finding the path of least resistance. They reached a 12-foot wall. The first man didn't slow down. The second man braced against the wall. The first man stepped on the second man's thigh, was boosted up, grabbed the top, pulled himself over. Total time 4 seconds. The rest of the team followed. A human chain. No ladders. No equipment. Just bodies used as tools. "Got him, Himmel," Helga breathed. "They're like wolves," Hoffman finished. "They move like a pack." The second team was breaching a building. They didn't knock, didn't announce. One man placed a charge on the door, small controlled, stepped back. The explosion was sharp, precise. The door disappeared. The team flowed through the opening before the smoke cleared. From inside the building came the sound of blanks firing, simulated combat. The Rangers were clearing rooms. Anna counted 12 seconds from breach to all-clear signal. 12 seconds, she whispered. They cleared 4 rooms in 12 seconds. Below, a Ranger stumbled, went down. Immediately, 2 others moved to him. One provided cover. One grabbed the wounded man's harness and dragged him to safety. Total time, 7 seconds. "Watch their spacing," Morrison said quietly behind them. "They never bunch up, never cross lines of fire. Every movement has purpose." Petra pointed. "That man there, he's just watching. He's not fighting." "He's pulling security," Morrison explained. "Watching their backs, making sure no one gets surprised. In real combat, that man's job keeps everyone else alive." The exercise continued. The Rangers assaulted the village from 3 directions simultaneously. They used smoke grenades, real ones that billowed thick gray clouds. They moved through the smoke like ghosts, emerged, disappeared, reappeared somewhere else. A Ranger threw a grenade. The explosion was real. Dirt and debris erupted. The team behind him rushed forward before the debris settled, using the blast as cover. Anna flinched. "That was real," Morrison confirmed. "They train with live ordnance because in combat there's no practice run. You either know how to move under fire or you die learning." Hoffman was gripping the observation rail. Her knuckles were white. "Our men trained with precision, with discipline, with parade ground formations," Morrison said quietly. "Tell me, Mrs. Hoffman, did Wehrmacht soldiers train with live grenades? Did they do building clearance under fire? Did they practice dragging wounded under simulated combat conditions?" Silence. "They did some," Helga said finally, "but not like this. This is practical," Morrison finished. "Everything you're seeing is designed for one purpose, keeping soldiers alive in combat while completing the mission. There's no glory in it, no beauty, just effectiveness." At 0945, the Rangers demonstrated close-quarters combat. Hand-to-hand. Fast. Brutal. Efficient. A Ranger demonstrator faced an opponent. The fight lasted 4 seconds. Grab, strike, throw, finish. The opponent, another Ranger playing enemy, was on the ground, dead. Again, Captain Chen called. They repeated it. Same technique. 4 seconds. Again. 4 seconds. Again. 4 seconds. Petra was counting. "They've done that movement 20 times now. Exactly the same. Every time. Muscle memory," Morrison explained. "In combat, you don't think. You react. That reaction needs to be perfect every time, not just when you're fresh and alert, so they drill it until it's instinct." At 10:30, something changed. A group of men approached the training area. Not Rangers. Different uniforms. Tuskegee Airmen, the all-black fighter pilot unit. They'd been training at a nearby airfield and had been invited to demonstrate joint operations. The German women stiffened. Anna's voice was barely a whisper. Negroes. They let Negroes fly their planes. They don't just let them, Morrison said. The Tuskegee Airmen have the best mission success rate in the European theater. They escort bombers. Not a single bomber under their protection was lost to enemy fighters. Not one. Hoffman shook her head. That's impossible. We were taught that they were inferior, Morrison finished. I know what you were taught. Watch what's real. The airmen coordinated with the Rangers on the ground. Radio communication. The Rangers marked targets with colored smoke. The airmen, though this was just a ground demonstration, showed how they would strafe those positions. The coordination was seamless, professional, absolutely colorblind. Helga started crying, quiet tears that ran down her face unchecked. I treated wounded men at Stalingrad, she said. Officers told us that Slavic soldiers were subhuman, that they couldn't think tactically, that they won through numbers alone, not skill. She wiped her eyes. But I saw their faces. In the field hospitals, Russian soldiers we'd captured. They looked like our soldiers, scared, brave, human. And I knew the officers were lying. But I said nothing, because saying something meant admitting everything else was a lie too. Anna turned away. This proves nothing. So they train well. So did our men. Did they? Morrison's voice was gentle but relentless. Your men lost. These men won. That's not ideology. That's not propaganda. That's objective fact. The question isn't whether American soldiers are perfect, they're not. The question is whether your belief in German superiority was ever based on reality, or just on what you wanted to believe. At 11:00, the Rangers demonstrated something that broke the last comfortable lie. Casualty evacuation under fire. A Ranger went down, simulated wound, blank ammunition, smoke everywhere, chaos. Immediately a medic appeared, black man, Corporal Jefferson. He moved through simulated gunfire to reach the wounded Ranger. Didn't hesitate, didn't calculate, just moved. He stabilized the wounded man. Called for evacuation. 2 more Rangers, 1 white, 1 Hispanic, moved in. They grabbed the wounded man's harness. The 3 of them, black medic, white soldier, Hispanic soldier, wounded man, moved together to cover. No one worried about race. No one calculated hierarchy. There was only the mission, get the wounded man to safety. Petra was shaking. They worked together, like they're all the same. They are all the same, Morrison said. That's the point. In combat, ideology doesn't stop bullets. Brotherhood does. Trust does. The willingness to die for the man beside you, regardless of where he came from or what he looks like, that's what wins wars. Hoffman's voice was hollow. We were told that racial purity made us strong, that mixing weakened civilizations, that you were lied to, Morrison said simply, and millions died because of those lies. The exercise ended at 12:15. The Rangers gathered their equipment. No ceremony, no speeches, they'd done their job. Now they were preparing for the next one. Captain Chen approached the observation area. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, just looked at the German women with the tired eyes of a man who'd seen too much war. Any questions? He asked in English. Morrison translated. Hoffman stood. For a long moment she just looked at him. Then in careful English, how do you make them so together, so unified? Chen considered the question. We don't make them anything. We just give them a common purpose, survive and complete the mission. When your life depends on the man next to you, you stop caring about everything except whether he can do his job. Race, religion, background, none of it matters when someone's shooting at you. But discipline is worthless without purpose, Chen interrupted. You can march in perfect formation. You can shine your boots until they glow. You can salute with textbook precision. But if you can't work as a team when it matters, if you can't trust each other under fire, if you can't put the mission above your ego, then all that discipline is just performance. It's theater. He turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. You think we're undisciplined because we don't goose step. You think we're weak because we smile and chew gum. But here's what you don't understand. Real strength doesn't need to prove itself every minute. Real strength is quiet. It shows up when needed and disappears when it's not. That's why we won. Not because we were perfect, because we were effective. He walked away. The German women sat in silence as guards prepared to escort them back to the compound. The sun was directly overhead now. Heat waves shimmered off the training ground. In the distance, rangers were already setting up for the afternoon session. Anna broke the silence. I don't understand. How could we have been so wrong? We weren't wrong about everything, Helga said quietly. We were right about discipline, about duty, about sacrifice. We were just wrong about who deserved those things. We thought they were for us alone, for our race, our nation. We forgot that every human being deserves dignity. And that's where it all went wrong. Petra was still watching the Tuskegee Airmen. My father told me that inferior races would destroy civilization, that we had to protect European culture from contamination. And I believed him. I believed him because he was my father, and I trusted him. Her voice broke. But he was wrong, and I helped him be wrong. I typed letters. I filed reports. I processed deportation orders and told myself they were just paperwork, just doing my job. I never asked where those people went. I never asked because I didn't want to know. Hoffman stood abruptly. We should return to the barracks. No. Helga remained seated. We should stay here. We should watch the afternoon session. We should force ourselves to see what we couldn't see before. Why? Anna demanded. Why torture ourselves? Because, Helga said, if we don't face it now, we'll spend the rest of our lives lying to ourselves. And I'm tired of lies. I'm tired of believing comfortable things that aren't true. I'm tired of serving evil and calling it good. Morrison had been standing quietly nearby. Now she approached. There's something else you should see this afternoon. We have former POWs coming to speak. American soldiers who were held in German camps. If you're willing to listen, they're willing to talk. Hoffman's face went pale. I'll listen, Helga said. I need to hear it. Me too, Petra whispered. One by one, the women agreed. Even Anna, though her face was tight with resistance. Even Hoffman, though her hands were shaking. They would stay. They would listen. They would learn what their superior civilization had actually done. At 14 terror hours, 5 American soldiers entered the observation area, former POWs. They'd been held in German camps, Stalag Luft 3, Stalag VA, Stalag Mine B. Some for months, some for years. Private Marcus Freeman was among them. He looked at the German women without hatred, just sadness. I don't know what you've been told about German POW camps, he began. Maybe you think they were humane. Maybe you think we were treated according to Geneva Convention. I'm here to tell you what actually happened. For the next hour, the women heard stories that destroyed every remaining illusion. Freeman described standing in snow for hours during roll call. Temperatures below zero. No coats. Guards laughing when men collapsed from exposure. Sergeant William Hayes, 32, captured at Kasserine Pass, described starvation rations. Bread made from sawdust. Soup that was just hot water with a potato floating in it. Men dying from dysentery because they were too weak to fight infection. Lieutenant Robert Crane, 28, shot down over Hamburg, described psychological torture. Guards telling them daily that their families had been killed, that America was losing, that they would never go home. Some men believed it. Some men broke. And Freeman described the racial segregation. Black POWs kept in separate barracks, given worse rations, beaten more frequently. Guards explaining that when Germany won, all black people would be dealt with permanently. They showed us photos, Freeman said. African villages burned, bodies in mass graves, German colonial troops standing over them. And the guards said, "This is your future. This is what happens to subhumans in the Reich." He paused, looked at each woman. You want to know why we fought so hard? Why we came to Europe and bled and died? This is why. Not for glory. not for conquest. Because your country built a machine designed to murder anyone who didn't fit your definition of human, and someone had to stop it. Anna was crying now, not quietly sobbing. We didn't know. We didn't. You knew, Freeman said gently. Maybe not the details, but you knew something terrible was happening. You saw neighbors disappear. You saw empty synagogues. You saw trains heading east full of people who never came back. You knew. You just chose not to ask questions. Hoffman had her face in her hands. Her voice came out muffled. My sons, my husband, they died believing they were heroes, died believing they served something good. Hayes spoke. Maybe they did believe that. Maybe they were good men who were lied to. But that doesn't change what they served. Belief doesn't make evil good. It just makes it harder to recognize. The sun was lowering toward the horizon when the meeting ended. The American soldiers left quietly. No anger, no vengeance, just testimony given and received. The German women sat in stunned silence. Finally, Helga spoke. What do we do now? Morrison answered. You go home, you rebuild, and you tell the truth. You tell your children what happened. You tell your neighbors what you saw. You make sure Germany never forgets, so Germany never repeats. But how do we live with what we've learned? Petra asked. How do we wake up tomorrow knowing we were part of this? One day at a time, Morrison said. One truth at a time. One moment of courage at a time. You can't change the past, but you can refuse to lie about it. That's how healing starts. As guards escorted them back to the barracks, the women walked differently. Slower, heavier, like they were carrying weight that hadn't been visible before but had always been there. Anna whispered to no one in particular. I used to think strength meant never doubting, never questioning, never admitting weakness. But maybe real strength is being able to say, I was wrong. No one disagreed. That night in the darkness of the barracks, Petra spoke into the silence. Do you think we can ever be forgiven? Hoffman answered. I don't know, but I think we have to try to forgive ourselves first. Not forget, never forget, but find a way to be human again despite what we've done. Through the window, stars appeared. The same stars that had watched camps burn and cities fall and millions die. The same stars that would watch whatever came next. Even in hunger and darkness, even in guilt and grief, somewhere beneath the weight of truth, 32 women began the long journey from belief to understanding. The night brought no relief. Heat lingered in the barracks like a living thing. The women lay in their bunks, but none slept. Outside, guards changed shifts at 2200 hours. Boots on gravel, muted voices, the ordinary sounds of a world that had become extraordinary. Petra broke the silence first. I keep seeing their faces. The soldiers who were prisoners. The way they looked at us. Not with hate, Helga said from her bunk. That's what I can't understand. After what they described, they should hate us, but they just looked sad. Disappointed, Anna corrected. Her voice was hollow. Like they expected better from us, and we failed. Hoffman sat up. In the dim light from the guard tower, searchlight sweeping past her face looked older, worn. How do you hate people who don't know what they're doing? That soldier Freeman, he understood we were tools, used by something bigger than ourselves. That doesn't excuse us. Helga's voice was firm. Tools can still choose. We chose not to see. We chose not to ask. We chose comfort over truth. The next morning came with news that shattered what little remained of their old world. May 9th, 06:30 hours. A guard posted the bulletin outside the barracks. Germany had surrendered. Unconditional. Total. The war in Europe was over. The women gathered around the notice. Some read it silently. Others spoke the words aloud as if hearing them might make them more real. It's finished, Petra whispered. Everything is finished. No, Hoffman's voice cut through. Now is when it truly begins. Now we have to live with what we did. At 09:00, Lieutenant Morrison arrived with an unusual request. There are Holocaust survivors arriving today. Jewish refugees who were liberated from Ravensbrück concentration camp. They're being processed for immigration to America. The camp commander thought, if you're willing, he thought it might be valuable for you to meet them. The reaction was immediate. Several women stepped back. Anna's face went white. Petra started shaking her head. No, I can't. I can't face. Then don't, Morrison said quietly. This is voluntary. No one will force you. But Captain Mitchell believes that understanding requires witnesses, not just hearing about atrocities, meeting the people who survived them. Helga stood. I'll go. Helga. Anna grabbed her arm. You don't know what they'll say to us, what they'll call us. Whatever they call us, we've earned it. Helga pulled free gently. I'm tired of running from truth. If these women survived hell, the least I can do is have the courage to hear about it. One by one, others agreed. Hoffman, Petra, even Anna, though her hands wouldn't stop trembling. 12 of the 32 women volunteered. The others stayed in the barracks, unable or unwilling to face this final confrontation with reality. At 1400 hours, they were escorted to a meeting room in the camp's administrative building. 7 women waited there, Jewish survivors of Ravensbrück. They ranged in age from 19 to 53. Each wore identification tags. Each carried documentation of their imprisonment. Each bore visible scars, some physical, all psychological. The oldest survivor stood first. Rachel Goldstein, 53 years old. Berlin native. Former teacher. Imprisoned in 1943 after hiding Jewish children in her apartment basement. I know what you're thinking, she said in German. Her voice was strong despite her gaunt frame. You're thinking, she must hate us. She must want revenge. And maybe part of me does. But mostly I just want you to understand what you allowed to happen. She gestured to the younger women beside her. This is Sarah. She was 14 when they took her from Warsaw. This is Miriam, 16, from Prague. This is Leah, 12, from Amsterdam. These girls should have been in school. Instead, they were starving in a camp because your government decided their lives had no value. Hoffman's voice cracked. We didn't know about the camps. We were told you were being resettled. Labor colonies. You knew enough. Rachel's interruption was gentle, but absolute. Maybe not the details. But you knew Jews were disappearing. You knew our shops were being burned. You knew our children were banned from schools. You saw Kristallnacht. You saw deportation orders. You knew something terrible was happening and you chose not to investigate because investigating meant risking comfort. She sat down slowly. Her legs were still weak from malnutrition. Let me tell you what Ravensbrück was like. Not to torture you, but because someone has to remember, and you're going to go back to Germany. You're going to live among people who will try to forget. So listen, remember, and never let Germany say it didn't know. For the next 3 hours, the survivors spoke. Their testimony was precise, detailed, undeniable. Sarah described arrival at Ravensbrück in winter 1944. January 15th. Temperature -12 Celsius. The trains were cattle cars. No heat, no sanitation. People died during transport and the living couldn't move away from the bodies. When the doors opened, SS guards separated families immediately. Children under 12 went one direction. Sarah never saw her younger brother again. Miriam described the barracks. Designed for 200 women, holding 800. Wooden bunks stacked 4 high. So crowded they slept in shifts. No mattresses, no blankets, lice everywhere. Typhus spread like fire. The sick were left to die because treating them meant using resources on useless lives. Leah, now 19 but 12 when imprisoned, described the experiments. Medical experiments. Ravensbrück had doctors who treated Jewish prisoners as laboratory animals. They tested drugs, performed unnecessary surgeries, studied how long humans could survive without food or water. All documented, all filed, all part of the bureaucratic machinery of extermination. Dr. Oberhäuser, Leah said quietly. She was the worst. She would smile while she hurt us, called us her little rabbits. She infected our legs with bacteria to test sulfonamide drugs. Some girls died from the infections. Others were crippled. One girl, Ruth, she was 13. The infection turned gangrenous. Dr. Oberhäuser amputated her leg without anesthesia to see how long she could stay conscious. Leah pulled up her skirt. The scar on her thigh was massive, puckered tissue from ankle to hip. I was one of the lucky ones. I lived. Petra was crying silently. Anna had her hand over her mouth. Hoffman sat perfectly still, face blank with shock. Rachel continued, "You want to know the worst part?" It wasn't the cruelty, though. There was plenty of that. It was the system. Everything was documented. Forms for arrival, forms for work assignments, forms for punishment, forms for execution, forms for disposal. German efficiency applied to mass murder. She pulled documents from her bag, originals that Allied liberators had allowed her to keep. Deportation orders, work assignments, death certificates. Look at these. Look at the signatures. Wehrmacht officers, SS administrators, civilian clerks, secretaries, people like you, people who processed paperwork and told themselves they were just doing their jobs. She placed one document in front of Hoffman, a deportation order, Jewish families from Berlin to Ravensbrück, dated November 1943, signed by administrative staff, filed in triplicate. This document sentenced 47 people to death, Rachel said. 31 died in the camp. 16 survived liberation. The person who typed this, who filed this, who stamped it and sent it forward, they probably went home that night and had dinner with their family. Probably never thought about the lives they'd just destroyed. Hoffman stared at the document. Her hands were shaking. I typed orders like this. Not this exact one, but orders like this. Transportation schedules, population transfers. We called them administrative relocations. Did you ever ask where they went? Rachel asked. No. Did you ever wonder why families needed guards and barbed wire for relocation? I chose not to wonder. Rachel leaned forward. That's what I need you to understand. The Holocaust didn't happen because Germans were monsters. It happened because normal people chose not to ask questions, chose convenience over conscience, chose to believe comfortable lies instead of uncomfortable truths. Miriam spoke next. Her voice was softer, more hesitant. I don't tell this story often, but you need to hear it. She described Block 10, the children's block. Ravensbrück kept some children alive for labor. Young fingers were useful for detailed work. Miriam had sorted ammunition components. 12-hour shifts, no breaks. Children who collapsed were beaten. Children who couldn't work were sent to the gas chambers, though Ravensbrück didn't have permanent gas chambers. They used mobile vans. Cheaper, more efficient. There was a girl named Esther, 8 years old, from Hungary. She had beautiful dark eyes. She reminded me of my little sister. One day, Esther got dysentery, couldn't work. The guard, Aufseher in bins, she grabbed Esther and dragged her toward the punishment block. I knew what that meant. Miriam stopped, took a breath. I did something stupid. I stepped forward and said, I'll do her work and mine. Please don't take her. Bins hit me, broke my nose, blood everywhere. Then she said, fine, you can have one more day with your little friend. Tomorrow you both go. The room was silent. That night, Esther and I shared my bunk. She was so small, so scared. She asked me if heaven was real. I said yes. I told her that in heaven no one is hungry and no one is afraid and families are together forever. She fell asleep in my arms. Miriam's voice broke. The next morning, bins came for us. But an Allied bombing raid hit nearby. Chaos. In the confusion, a Polish prisoner, I never learned her name, she grabbed Esther and hid her. They took me instead, beat me unconscious. When I woke up, I was in the medical block. Esther was alive. The Polish woman had saved her. But the Polish woman, Anna asked softly. They shot her the next day, found out she'd interfered, made an example. The weight of that sacrifice hung in the air. One woman dying so a child she'd never met might live one more day. Sarah spoke. You want to know what broke me? Not the hunger, not the cold, not even the fear. It was seeing German civilians. She described Liberation Day. April 30th, 1945. Soviet troops arrived at Ravensbrück. The SS fled. The prisoners were free. As they walked out of the camp, they passed through a nearby village. German civilians lined the streets. Some stared, some looked away. Some claimed they never knew the camp existed, despite being less than a mile away, despite the smoke from the crematorium visible every day, despite the smell that permeated everything. One woman, Sarah said. She looked at me, skin and bones, wearing prisoner rags, and said, "Why are you people still here? The war is over. Go home," like I was an inconvenience, like my suffering was something that should be tidied away now that it was no longer useful. She looked at the German women. "So when you say you didn't know, I believe you didn't want to know. But don't insult us by claiming ignorance was impossible. You had eyes, you had ears, you had consciences. You just chose not to use them." At 17:30, the meeting ended. The survivors left quietly. No dramatics, no vengeance. They'd simply told their truth and left the German women to carry it. Hoffman sat frozen in her chair. Morrison approached carefully. "Are you all right?" "No." Hoffman's voice was dead. "I will never be all right again." "Good," Morrison said softly. "All right means comfortable. Comfortable means forgetting. You need to stay uncomfortable. Germany needs to stay uncomfortable. Otherwise, this happens again." That evening, the women gathered in the barracks. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Petra broke the silence. "I want to die." The statement hung there. Simple, honest, devastating. "I typed deportation orders," Petra continued. "Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. I processed population transfers, labor assignments. I was good at my job, efficient. My supervisor praised my speed and accuracy. And every document I typed sent people to places like Ravensbrück." She looked at her hands. "These hands killed people, not directly, but they made it possible. They were part of the machine, and I can't live with that." Helga moved to sit beside her. "Then don't live with it alone. We all carry this now, all of us. We carry it together or we don't carry it at all." "But how?" Anna's voice came from the darkness. "How do we wake up tomorrow? How do we eat breakfast, knowing what we know? How do we ever smile again, or feel joy, or believe in anything good?" "I don't know," Hoffman admitted. "But I know we can't escape it through death. That's the coward's way. We have to live. We have to go home. We have to tell the truth. That's our punishment and our redemption." The next day, May 10th, something shifted in the camp. The German women stopped maintaining military formations, stopped singing old songs, stopped referring to each other by titles. They were just women now. Broken, struggling, human. Captain Mitchell noticed. He called Morrison to his office. "They're different." "Yes." Morrison set down her coffee. "The survivors broke through their last defenses. They can't maintain the illusion anymore. They've seen the face of what they served, and they can't unsee it." "Are they going to be okay?" Morrison considered. "Some will, some won't. Petra is high risk. She tried to harm herself last night." Hoffman stopped her. "But the despair is real. They've lost everything: country, ideology, purpose, innocence. What's left is guilt and the question of whether redemption is even possible." "Is it?" Mitchell asked. "I don't know. I'm a psychologist, not a priest, but I think the fact that they feel guilt is important. Guilt means conscience. Conscience means humanity. They can rebuild from that." On May 14th, Dr. Abraham Feldman arrived at Camp Rustin, 51 years old, Jewish psychiatrist from Vienna, lost his wife and 3 children at Auschwitz, spent the war years treating trauma survivors in London. The army had recruited him specifically for cases like this, helping German civilians process their complicity in atrocities. His first meeting was with Hoffman. She sat across from him in the interview room, refusing to meet his eyes. "You're Jewish," she said finally. "Yes." "Then you must hate me." Feldman was quiet for a moment. "I hate what you served, what you helped build, but I don't know you well enough to hate you." Tell me about yourself." Over the next hour, Hoffman talked. About Berlin before the war, about her husband, a kind man who believed in duty and honor, about her sons who'd joined the Wehrmacht because it was expected, about her own work processing communications, never asking what the messages meant, never questioning orders. "I wasn't evil," she said finally. "I didn't kill anyone. I didn't hate Jews personally. I just went along, followed rules, did my job. And now I've learned that my job was part of a machine that murdered millions." "Tell me," Feldman said gently, "if you could go back, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?" Hoffman thought for a long time. "I would ask questions. I would investigate. I would refuse orders that felt wrong. I would risk my comfort and my safety to stop what was happening." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't. And that's what I have to live with." Feldman leaned forward. "Mrs. Hoffman, guilt is appropriate. Despair is not. Guilt says, I did wrong. Despair says, I am irredeemable. One leads to change. The other leads to death. Which will you choose?" "I don't know if I deserve to change." "That's not your decision to make. You don't get to opt out of responsibility through suicide or surrender. You have to live. You have to face what you did. You have to spend whatever years remain making different choices. That's not a reward, it's an obligation." Over the following weeks, Feldman met with each woman individually. Petra, who'd tried to harm herself. Anna, who'd retreated into denial. Helga, who'd become obsessed with documenting every detail as if confession could equal absolution. He gave them no easy answers, no forgiveness, just tools for survival. Ways to process guilt without being destroyed by it. Ways to face truth without drowning in shame. By early June, patterns emerged. Some women, like Helga and Petra, began writing, documenting their experiences, preparing testimony for when they returned to Germany. Others, like Anna, struggled with acceptance, swung between denial and despair. Hoffman found something unexpected purpose. She began studying the documents from Ravensbrück survivors, learning names, memorizing stories, building a mental archive of what had been done so she could bear witness when she went home. On June 15th, Captain Mitchell announced that repatriation would begin in July. The women would return to Germany not as prisoners but as witnesses. They would go home to a destroyed country and face the work of rebuilding both nation and conscience. That night, Hoffman wrote a letter. Not to send, there was no one left to receive it, but to remember, to clarify, to commit herself to whatever came next. "I served evil," she wrote. "I didn't mean to, but intention doesn't erase consequences. People died because of orders I processed. Children starved because of systems I supported. I can never undo that, but I can refuse to let it be forgotten. I can tell the truth. I can warn others. I can spend whatever years I have left making sure Germany never forgets what happens when normal people choose comfort over conscience." She folded the letter, put it in her pocket, a covenant with herself, a promise to the dead. Outside night settled over Camp Rustin. Guards walked their posts. Somewhere a radio played American music. In the barracks, 32 women tried to sleep carrying burdens that would never fully lighten, but might eventually become bearable. Even in camps designed to silence truth, even in darkness built from lies, even in the crushing weight of guilt and grief, whispers of conscience had begun to break through the barbed wire of self-deception and denial. June turned to July with the slow inevitability of guilt becoming permanent. The heat in Louisiana remained oppressive, but inside the barracks at Camp Rustin, a different kind of heat had settled the burning awareness of complicity that no amount of time would fully cool. July 3, 1945, Dr. Feldman conducted his final group session. All 32 women attended, though some still struggled to speak. They sat in a circle in the mess hall windows, open to catch whatever breeze might pass through. Outside, American soldiers prepared for Independence Day celebrations. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. "Before you return to Germany," Feldman began, "I want to address something. Many of you have asked me how to live with what you've learned, How to face your families, your neighbors, your own reflections in mirrors. I can't give you easy answers because there aren't any. He paused, looking at each face. These women who'd arrived 3 months ago with contempt in their eyes and iron in their spines now sat hunched, diminished, carrying weight that was invisible but crushing. But I can tell you this guilt without action is just another form of self-indulgence. Feeling terrible isn't enough. You must do something with that feeling. Transform it into testimony, into warning, into the determination that what happened never happens again. Hoffman raised her hand. Dr. Feldman, you lost your family at Auschwitz. How can you sit here and try to help us? We were part of the system that murdered them. Feldman was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but his eyes were somewhere else, somewhere darker. My wife's name was Sarah. My daughters were Rachel, Miriam, and Leah. Yes, like the survivors you met. My son was David. He was 9 years old. He wanted to be a doctor like me. He pulled out a photograph, worn, creased from being carried and looked at countless times. A family portrait from 1938. Before, when such things were still possible. They were taken in 1942. I was already in London working with refugees. I tried to get them out, filed papers, begged embassies. Nothing worked. The last letter I received from Sarah said they were being relocated to the east for labor. She tried to sound optimistic, said they would be together, said she loved me. He put the photo away carefully. I learned later they were gassed at Auschwitz within hours of arrival. My children didn't even make it through selection. Too young for labor. Sent directly to the chambers. The women sat frozen. Several were crying. So, why do I help you? Feldman continued. Because hatred is easy. Revenge is easy. What's hard is understanding that most evil isn't done by monsters. It's done by ordinary people who make small choices every day to look away, to stay quiet, to follow orders. If I can help you understand that, maybe you'll go home and teach others. Maybe your children won't make the same choices. That's the only revenge that matters. Petra spoke, voice barely above a whisper. How do we face our children? How do I tell my daughter that I helped murder children her age? With truth, Feldman said. With the understanding that children need to learn from their parents' mistakes, not be protected from them. Germany will try to forget. You must refuse to let it. That's your burden and your purpose. Anna had been silent throughout the session. Now she stood abruptly. I can't do this. I can't go back and be some kind of moral witness. I just want to forget. I want to move somewhere no one knows what Germany did and start over. Then you'll carry the poison with you, Feldman said gently. And it will leak out in small ways in how you raise your children, in what you teach them to value, in whether you help them develop conscience or teach them to avoid discomfort. You can't outrun what you know. You can only choose what you do with it. The session ended with no resolution, no catharsis, just 32 women facing the reality that they would leave Camp Rustin in days and return to a country they no longer recognized, carrying knowledge they couldn't forget. That evening, Lieutenant Morrison found Hoffman sitting alone outside the barracks, watching the sunset. The sky was orange and purple, beautiful, in the way that nature remains beautiful, regardless of human tragedy. May I join you? Morrison asked. Hoffman nodded. They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Hoffman spoke. When I first arrived here, I thought I was a victim, arrested by Americans, held prisoner, humiliated. I told myself I was suffering unjustly. And now I understand I wasn't arrested nearly soon enough. Hoffman's voice was flat. If someone had arrested me in 1938 before I started processing those orders, maybe I could have lived with myself. But they let me keep working, and I kept choosing to not ask questions, and people died because of my choice. Morrison chose her words carefully. Mrs. Hoffman, Captain Mitchell wants me to ask you something. He's preparing a report for Army intelligence. They're building cases for war crimes tribunals, not just military leaders, but civilian administrators. People who made the Holocaust function on a bureaucratic level. Your testimony could be valuable. Hoffman turned sharply. You want me to testify against my colleagues? I want you to testify for the victims. There's a difference. They'll call me a traitor. They'll call you a witness. The question is whether you care more about being liked or being truthful. Hoffman looked back at the sunset. I'll testify, not for you, for the children in those photographs Rachel showed us. For Esther, for all the names I'll never know. Someone has to say out loud what we did. On July 8th, official orders arrived. The women would be repatriated in 3 groups over 2 weeks. First group would depart July 15th. Hoffman, Helga, and 8 others were assigned to that group. The remaining days took on a strange quality, both too fast and impossibly slow. The women packed their few belongings, wrote letters to family members they hoped were still alive, prepared mentally for a Germany they knew would be unrecognizable. Captain Mitchell called a final assembly on July 14th. All 32 women, all American staff who'd worked with them. He stood before them without notes, without ceremony. Tomorrow the first group goes home. The rest will follow soon. I won't pretend we became friends. But I will say this, you came here as believers in a false ideology. You leave as witnesses to truth. What you do with that is up to you. He paused, looked at each woman. Germany will be tempted to forget, to minimize, to say we didn't know, or it wasn't that bad, or everyone did terrible things during war. You know better now. You've heard from survivors. You've seen the evidence. You carry an obligation to remember and to make Germany remember. His voice hardened slightly. Some of you will honor that obligation. Some won't. Some will go home and retreat into comfortable lies again. I can't stop that. But I want you to know the world is watching Germany now. And the world will judge not just what you did during the war, but what you do with peace. That night, the women who would leave in the morning held a final gathering. No singing. No ritual. Just quiet conversation about fear and hope and the uncertainty of what came next. Helga spoke about her plan to return to nursing. But different this time. I'll treat everyone displaced persons, refugees, former prisoners. Everyone Germany tried to destroy. That's how I make amends. Petra talked about education. I want to teach. Show children what happens when people stop thinking critically, when they follow leaders without question. Anna remained uncertain. I don't know what I'll do. I don't know if I'm strong enough to face it every day. Hoffman put a hand on her shoulder. None of us are strong enough alone. That's why we stay in contact. Why we support each other. Not to forget, never to forget, but to help each other live with remembering. At 06:00, on July 15th, the first truck arrived. 10 women climbed aboard with small bags containing everything they owned. Guards secured the transport. Captain Mitchell and Lieutenant Morrison stood at attention as the truck prepared to leave. Hoffman was the last aboard. She paused, turned back to Mitchell. Thank you. For what? For not letting us stay comfortable. For forcing us to see. For treating us like humans who could still learn instead of monsters beyond redemption. Mitchell nodded once. Go home. Tell the truth. That's all the thanks required. The truck rolled out of Camp Ruston at 06:47. The remaining women watched until it disappeared. Then they returned to the barracks to wait their turn. The journey home took 3 weeks by truck to New Orleans, by ship to Liverpool, by train across devastated Europe to occupied Germany. Hoffman kept a journal during the voyage, documenting everything she'd learned, everyone she'd met, every story she'd heard. August 4th, 1945. Crossed into Germany today. I didn't recognize it. Not just the destroyed buildings that I expected, but the faces. Everyone looks defeated, hollow, like they're walking through a nightmare they can't wake from. No one admits to supporting Hitler. No one admits to knowing about the camps. Everyone was just following orders, just surviving, just trying to protect their families. The same lies I told myself. I want to shake them, make them listen, but I know it won't work. People only hear truth when they're ready. I wasn't ready until American soldiers forced me to see. She arrived in Berlin on August 7th. The city was unrecognizable. Rubble stretched for blocks. Buildings gutted by bombs or fire or artillery. Soviet soldiers on every corner. The smell of death still hung in the air, bodies still being found in collapsed basements and sealed bunkers in mass graves. Her apartment building was gone. Completely destroyed. She stood at the address, but there was nothing, just a crater where home used to be. A neighbor she barely recognized approached. "Margareta, we thought you were dead." "I was in America, detained. I just returned." The neighbor's face shuddered. "America? So you were collaborating with the enemy?" "No, I was learning about what we did, about the camps, about—" "We don't talk about that." The neighbor's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "It's over. Germany needs to move forward, not dwell on the past. If you're smart, you'll forget whatever propaganda they told you and focus on rebuilding." Hoffman felt something cold settle in her chest. This was what Mitchell had warned about. The forgetting had already begun. That night, she found temporary shelter in a refugee center. Former school converted to housing for the displaced. She shared a room with 7 other women, all with their own stories of loss and survival. One was a camp survivor, tattooed number on her arm. The others avoided her, avoided eye contact, avoided acknowledging what that number meant. Hoffman approached the survivor after the others slept. "My name is Margareta. I was held in American detention. I met survivors from Ravensbrück. They told me what happened." The woman looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "And you believe them?" "Yes. That's more than most. That's more than—" The woman's name was Ruth, 47 years old, Auschwitz survivor, lost her husband and 3 children. People here don't want to hear. They want to pretend it didn't happen, or that it was exaggerated, or that both sides did terrible things so it balances out. "It doesn't balance," Hoffman said. "No, it doesn't." Over the following weeks, Hoffman traveled through occupied Germany, documenting what she found. The denial was universal. The forgetting had become epidemic. Even confronted with evidence film from liberated camps, testimony from survivors, documents captured from Nazi archives, people found ways to avoid accepting truth. The photos are propaganda. The survivors are lying for sympathy. "We were bombed too. Dresden was just as bad. Everyone suffered. Why should Jews be special?" She found Helga in Hamburg, working at a makeshift hospital, treating former concentration camp inmates. The nurse had kept her promise. She looked exhausted, older than her 38 years, but her eyes were clear. "You came," Helga said. "I told you I would." They worked together for 3 days. The patients were mostly former prisoners, Jews, political dissidents, Romani, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses. All the categories the Reich had deemed unworthy of life, all desperately malnourished, many dying from diseases contracted in camps. Some couldn't speak anymore. Trauma had stolen their voices. One patient, a boy of 14 who looked 9 from starvation, grabbed Hoffman's hand while she changed his bandages. "Are you German?" he asked in Yiddish. Helga translated. Hoffman nodded. "Why are you helping me? Germans killed my family." Hoffman didn't have a good answer. "Because I should have helped before. Because I didn't, and now I'm trying to— I don't know. Maybe there is no reason good enough." The boy studied her face. "My father said most Germans weren't evil. Just scared. Too scared to be good." "Are you still scared?" "Yes, but I'm trying to be good anyway." The boy nodded, closed his eyes. That's something. In early September, Anna arrived in Hamburg. She'd been assigned to the 2nd Transport Group, had taken a different route home. She looked worse than Hoffman remembered, thinner, more fragile, like a strong wind might break her. "I can't do this," Anna said without preamble. "I can't face it every day. Everyone either denies it happened or blames us for losing. No one wants truth. They just want to forget and move on." "Then we don't let them," Hoffman replied. How do we fight an entire country's determination to forget? One person at a time, one testimony at a time, one moment of courage at a time. On September 15th, Hoffman received a letter from Captain Mitchell forwarded through Army mail. It was brief. Mrs. Hoffman, the war crimes tribunals begin in November. Nuremberg. They need witnesses who can testify about civilian administration, about how the bureaucracy enabled genocide. Your name has been submitted. This is voluntary. No one will force you. But the tribunal needs people like you Germans who worked in the system and can explain how ordinary people became complicit. Think about it. Let me know. Captain Robert Mitchell. She showed the letter to Helga. What do you think? I think if you don't testify, you'll regret it the rest of your life. They'll hate me. Call me a traitor. Maybe worse. They already hate you for knowing the truth. Might as well make the hatred count for something. Hoffman wrote back that night. Captain Mitchell, I'll testify. Not because I want forgiveness. Because the victims deserve truth spoken aloud in court. Because Germany needs to hear from someone who was inside the machine. Because my sons died for a lie, and maybe my testimony can help ensure no one else's sons die for the same lie. Tell me when and where. I'll be there. Margareta Hoffman. October brought rain and cold. Winter was coming. The first winter of peace. But for many it would be harder than the winters of war. Food was scarce. Fuel was scarcer. The destroyed cities offered little shelter. And the psychological weight of defeat, of guilt, of truth that couldn't be avoided, that crushed more thoroughly than any Allied bomb. Hoffman continued her work, traveling between cities, collecting testimonies, documenting survivors' stories. She met Petra in Frankfurt. The young woman had found work translating for American occupation forces. She looked healthier, more grounded. I'm helping process displaced persons applications, Petra explained. Jews trying to emigrate. Poles trying to go home. People looking for family members. Every application I process is one small way of helping people Germany tried to destroy. That's good work. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's something. They stood together in the ruins of Frankfurt's old Jewish quarter. Synagogues burned, shops destroyed, homes empty. The absence was louder than any presence could be. Do you think they'll ever forgive us? Petra asked quietly. I don't think that's the question, Hoffman replied. The question is whether we can forgive ourselves enough to keep living, but not so much that we forget what we did. November arrived. With it, the Nuremberg trials began. The world's attention focused on a courtroom in a damaged German city, where the victors would judge the defeated, where evidence would be presented, where testimony would be given, where truth would be spoken, whether Germany wanted to hear it or not. Hoffman received her summons for November 28th. She would testify about civilian administration, about how ordinary bureaucracy enabled extraordinary evil, about how people like her processed the paperwork of genocide without ever seeing the blood on their hands. The night before her testimony, she couldn't sleep. She walked through Nuremberg's ruins until dawn. The city where Nazi rallies had once drawn hundreds of thousands, where Hitler had proclaimed the racial laws that started everything. Now it was rubble hosting its own judgment. At dawn, she stood before the courthouse where she would testify. The building was damaged but functional. Flags of the Allied powers hung above the entrance. Inside, the machinery of justice waited. Helga had come to support her. Anna had tried but couldn't face it. Petra sent a telegram. Tell them everything, for Esther, for Ruth, for all of them. As the sun rose over Nuremberg's broken skyline, Hoffman thought about the last 3 years. The certainty she'd felt serving the Reich. The contempt she'd felt for American soldiers. The comfort of believing lies. And then the shattering, the Rangers, the survivors, the testimonies, the photographs, the undeniable truth that couldn't be looked away from. Freedom had come to Germany. Liberation had arrived. The camps were empty. The prisoners released, the Nazi regime destroyed. But for the millions who died in those camps, in those gas chambers, in those mass graves, freedom had come too late. They were gone, vanished into smoke and ash. their absence a wound that would never fully heal. And for those who remained survivors and perpetrators alike, freedom meant something different than celebration. It meant the hard work of facing truth, of building justice, of ensuring memory outlasted forgetting. Hoffman walked toward the courthouse doors, toward testimony, toward truth spoken aloud, toward whatever came after. Behind her, the sun continued rising over Nuremberg, beautiful and indifferent. The same sun that had watched the rallies and the camps and the murders and the liberation. The same sun that would watch whatever Germany chose to become next. The courtroom in Nuremberg was smaller than Hoffman had imagined. She'd expected something grand theatrical befitting the world's attention. Instead, it was functional. Wooden benches, fluorescent lights, translation booths lining the walls, the mundane architecture of justice. November 28, 1945, 09:15 hours. She took the witness stand with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The judges sat elevated before her: American, British, French, Soviet. Representatives of nations that had defeated Germany and now sat in judgment of what Germany had done. The prosecutor was an American, Colonel Robert Jackson. His voice was measured, professional, devoid of anger. That somehow made it worse. Mrs. Hoffman, please state your occupation during the war years. I was a communications supervisor in the Berlin government district. I processed encrypted messages and administrative orders. And what types of orders did you process? She'd prepared for this, rehearsed it with Lieutenant Morrison before leaving Camp Rustin. But preparation didn't make the words easier. Transportation schedules, population transfers, resource allocations, labor assignments. She paused. Deportation orders. Did you know what these deportation orders meant? The question hung in the air. The entire case, the entire moral reckoning balanced on this moment. I knew enough. Her voice was steady. I knew Jewish families were being removed from their homes. I knew they were being sent east. I knew guards were required. I knew they weren't coming back. I chose not to ask for details because asking meant acknowledging what I suspected, and acknowledging meant having to act, or refuse, and I was too afraid to do either. Jackson placed a document before her. Do you recognize this? It was a deportation order, November 1943. Jewish families from Berlin to Ravensbrück, 47 names, ages listed beside each, children marked specially. I processed this order, or one like it. They all looked the same after a while. Just paperwork, just bureaucracy. I told myself I was just doing my job. And now I know that's what everyone tells themselves. The guards at the camps said they were just following orders. The train conductors said they were just doing their jobs. The clerks and secretaries and administrators, we all said the same thing. And 47 people died because of this one document. Millions died because of documents just like it. The testimony lasted 3 hours. Jackson asked detailed questions about administrative procedures, about how orders flowed through bureaucratic channels, about how ordinary people became complicit in genocide through small daily choices that accumulated into monstrous outcomes. During a break, Hoffman saw other defendants, Nazi officials awaiting their own trials. Hermann Göring watching proceedings with bored contempt. Julius Streicher, the propagandist who'd spread hatred through newspapers. Albert Speer, the architect who'd designed the physical infrastructure of the Reich. They didn't look like monsters. They looked like men. Ordinary men who'd made extraordinary choices. Men who'd convinced themselves they were serving something greater than themselves while actually serving something inhuman. When testimony resumed, Jackson asked the question Hoffman had been dreading. Mrs. Hoffman, if you could speak to Germans who still deny the Holocaust occurred or who minimize its scope, what would you say? She looked directly at the gallery. German citizens had been allowed to observe. Some looked away. Some met her eyes with hostility. A few, very few, looked at her with something that might have been recognition. I would tell them I was you. I was the person who didn't want to know, who found reasons to look away, who told myself comfortable lies because uncomfortable truths required action I was too afraid to take. And I would tell them that denial is another form of complicity. That refusing to remember is another way of killing the victims again, that the only way forward is through truth, no matter how much it hurts. Her voice broke on the last words. The judges allowed her a moment to compose herself. Then Jackson's final question. What do you hope will come from your testimony? I hope German mothers hear it and ask themselves what they would have done. I hope German fathers hear it and question whether following orders is always the right choice. I hope German children hear it and learn that conscience matters more than comfort. I hope the world hears it and understands that the Holocaust wasn't done by monsters. It was done by ordinary people who chose small evils every day, until those small evils became systematic murder. And I hope, her voice was barely a whisper now, I hope the victims know that at least one person who helped destroy them is willing to say out loud, I did this. I am guilty. And I will spend whatever years I have left making sure no one forgets. She stepped down at 14:30. Helga met her outside the courtroom. They stood in the cold November air breath visible in clouds. You did it, Helga said. I said words. That's not the same as doing enough. It's more than most will ever do. That night they received word that Anna had been found dead in Munich. Suicide. She'd left a note. I can't live knowing what I helped do. I can't face another day carrying this weight. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The news struck like a physical blow. Petra arrived in Nuremberg the next day, pale and shaking. The 3 remaining women from Camp Rustin sat together in a hotel room that was too cold and too empty. She couldn't bear it, Petra said. The guilt, the shame, the knowledge that she'd been part of something evil. So she chose death over living with truth, Hoffman said. But death doesn't erase what she did. It just means she's not here to testify, to warn, to help prevent it from happening again. Don't be cruel, Helga snapped. She was in pain, unbearable pain. I know. Hoffman's voice softened. And I understand. There are days I want to follow her, days when living seems impossible. But we can't. We have to stay. We have to remember. That's our punishment and our purpose. They buried Anna in Munich on December 3rd, a small funeral. Few attendees. Most people avoided association with anyone connected to Nazi administration. The priest who performed the service was uncomfortable rushing through prayers as if speed could somehow minimize contamination. At the graveside, Hoffman spoke quietly. Anna couldn't carry the weight. I don't judge her for that, but I pray I'm strong enough to carry it, to live with knowing what I did, to spend my remaining years making sure Germany never forgets. That's all we can do, live and remember and testify. Christmas 1945 arrived without celebration. Germany was starving. The Allies had imposed strict rationing. Former Nazis were being identified, arrested, processed through denazification courts. The entire country was being forced to confront what it had done. But confrontation didn't mean acceptance. Most Germans still denied, still minimized, still claimed they hadn't known. The comfortable lies persisted because truth was too heavy to bear. On January 15, 1946, Hoffman received an unexpected visitor. Marcus Freeman, the American soldier who'd confronted her through the Camp Rustin fence. He was in Germany with occupation forces had heard about her testimony at Nuremberg. They met in a cafe in Frankfurt, both awkward, neither quite sure what to say. Why did you come? Hoffman asked. Freeman stirred his coffee. I wanted to see if you were real. If your testimony was real, or if it was just performance. Germans trying to look repentant to avoid consequences. And I think you're real. He looked at her directly. I think you actually understand what you did. That's rare. Most people I meet here are still making excuses. I make excuses too. Every day. My mind tries to find ways to minimize my guilt, to say I was just following orders, to claim I didn't really understand. But then I remember the survivors I met, the testimonies I heard, and I force myself back to truth. Freeman nodded slowly. That's all any of us can do. Keep choosing truth even when lies are easier. They talked for 2 hours. Freeman described occupation duty, the difficulty of treating Germans with humanity while holding them accountable, the frustration of watching denial persist, the small victories when someone rare, precious, actually acknowledged truth. "There's a woman in Munich," he said, "runs a shelter for camp survivors. Former SS secretary, now dedicating her life to helping the people her work helped destroy. That's redemption, maybe. Not forgiveness. She'll never be forgiven, shouldn't be forgiven, but redemption through action." "Is that what I'm doing?" Hoffman asked. "Seeking redemption." "I don't know. Is it?" She thought for a long time. "No, I'm not seeking redemption. I'm seeking accuracy. I want the historical record to be true. I want Germany's children to learn what actually happened. I want the victims to be remembered correctly. Redemption, that's not something I deserve to seek." Freeman stood to leave, extended his hand. Hoffman shook it. "Keep testifying," he said. "Keep telling the truth. That's how we make sure this doesn't happen again." Spring brought new growth to Germany's ruins. Flowers pushing through rubble, trees budding on damaged branches, life persisting despite everything. Hoffman found symbolic comfort in that. If nature could recover, perhaps humanity could too. But recovery required remembering, not forgetting. In April 1946, she began working with Allied historians documenting the Holocaust. They were building archives, collecting testimony, preserving evidence, creating a historical record so comprehensive that denial would become impossible. She met other Germans willing to testify, not many, perhaps 100 out of millions. But each one was precious. Each one was someone choosing truth over comfort. One was a former guard from Dachau, now broken, haunted, unable to sleep without seeing the faces of prisoners he'd beaten. He testified about daily routines, about how violence became normalized, about how ordinary men became capable of extraordinary cruelty through gradual escalation and group mentality. Another was a train conductor who transported prisoners to camps. He described loading families into cattle cars, ignoring their pleas, telling himself he was just doing his job. Now he visited schools, showing students his conductor's uniform, explaining how ordinary work can facilitate evil when people stop asking questions. In June, Hoffman returned to Ravensbrück. The camp had been liberated but remained standing. Soviet authorities were preserving it as evidence, as memorial, as warning. She walked through the gates she'd only heard about, saw the barracks where thousands had been crammed, saw the medical block where experiments were conducted, saw the crematorium where bodies were burned, saw the wall where prisoners were shot. Rachel Goldstein was there, the survivor from Camp Rustin, now working as a guide showing visitors what had been done. "You came back," Rachel said. "I needed to see it, to understand completely." They walked together through the camp. Rachel pointed out locations, explained procedures, described daily life in matter-of-fact tones that made the horror more real than any dramatic telling could. At the crematorium, Hoffman broke down, fell to her knees, sobbed with a grief that had no bottom. "I helped send people here. I processed the orders. I made this possible." Rachel didn't offer comfort, didn't say it was okay or that she was forgiven, just stood there allowing the grief its space. Finally, she said, "You can't undo it. You can't bring them back. You can only make sure it's remembered. That's not redemption, but it's something." In the visitor book, Hoffman wrote, "I came here to bear witness to what I helped create. I will spend my remaining life ensuring others know this truth. May the victims forgive what cannot be forgiven. May their memory be eternal." July 1946 brought news from America. Captain Mitchell had written. The letter was brief but carried weight. "Mrs. Hoffman, your testimony at Nuremberg has been valuable. But more importantly, your continued work documenting truth matters. Lieutenant Morrison and I are compiling a study of how ordinary people become complicit in extraordinary evil. Your insights would be valuable. Would you be willing to participate? This isn't about punishment or redemption. It's about understanding, so it doesn't happen again. Robert Mitchell." She wrote back immediately. Captain Mitchell, I will help in any way possible. Not because I deserve to move past guilt, but because understanding how I became complicit might help others recognize and resist when it begins again. Because it will begin again. Human nature doesn't change. Only vigilance prevents repetition. Tell me what you need. Margareta Hoffman. August brought a reunion. Helga and Petra traveled to Berlin. The three women who'd survived Anna's death, who'd chosen to keep living despite guilt, met at the ruins of Hoffman's former apartment building. We should start something, Petra said. An organization. Germans committed to remembering, to educating, to preventing forgetting. They'll hate us, Helga warned. Most Germans want to move forward. They'll see us as traitors. Let them, Hoffman said. We stopped caring about being liked when we chose truth over comfort. They founded it that day, standing in rubble. The Society for Historical Truth. Their mission document Nazi atrocities, preserve survivor testimony, educate German youth, resist denial and minimization. The first meeting had 7 attendees. By December they had 43. By 1947 they had chapters in 8 cities. By 1950, they had thousands of members Germans who'd chosen to face history rather than flee from it. But they remained a minority. Most Germans still preferred forgetting. The economic miracle of the 1950s made forgetting easier, focus on rebuilding, on prosperity, on moving forward. The past was uncomfortable. Better to leave it buried. Hoffman spent the next 2 decades testifying. At trials. In schools. On radio programs, in newspapers. Anywhere that would listen, she told her story. Not to seek sympathy, she made clear she deserved none. But to warn, to explain, to illuminate the psychology of complicity. In 1961, she testified at the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem. Adolf Eichmann, architect of the Holocaust's logistics, captured in Argentina and brought to Israel for judgment. Hoffman explained how people like her made people like Eichmann possible, how bureaucracy enabled evil, how ordinary people processing paperwork facilitated genocide. Eichmann sat in his glass booth claiming he'd just followed orders, claiming he had no personal hatred of Jews, claiming he was just doing his job efficiently. Hoffman looked at him and saw herself, saw what she could have become if she'd never been forced to confront truth. That recognition terrified and motivated her in equal measure. In 1965, she published her memoir, From Contempt to Understanding, a German Woman's Journey from Complicity to Conscience. Critics called it self-serving. Survivors were divided. Some appreciated her honesty. Others felt she was seeking absolution she hadn't earned. She accepted all criticism. I don't write to be praised. I write so people understand how someone like me becomes someone like Eichmann. How small choices compound, how looking away becomes habit, how evil becomes normalized when good people remain silent. Petra followed with her own book in 1967, Typing Death, a Secretary's Role in Genocide. More technical, more focused on bureaucratic mechanics, how paperwork made murder possible, how administrative efficiency facilitated atrocity. Helga never wrote a book. Instead, she worked, treated former prisoners, trained young nurses in ethics and conscience, devoted 50 years to healing what she'd helped break. The 3 women remained close until death. Hoffman died in 1978, age 76. Petra in 1985, 63. Helga in 1996, 89. All outlived Anna by decades. All carried guilt until their final breaths. All refused to let Germany forget. Their legacy lived in archives they built, in testimonies they preserved, in students they taught, in Germans who learned to face history because these women had faced it first. At Hoffman's funeral, Marcus Freeman spoke. Now a retired colonel, he'd remained in contact for 30 years. Margareta Hoffman wasn't a hero. She was complicit in monstrous evil, but she chose to face that evil rather than deny it. She chose testimony over comfort. She chose truth over peace. That doesn't erase what she did, but it matters. It matters because most people never face themselves that honestly. Most people never have the courage to say, I did evil, and I must spend my life making sure others understand how I got there. He placed a stone on her grave. Jewish tradition for honoring the dead. She didn't deserve forgiveness, but she earned acknowledgement. She showed that even those who help build hell can choose to testify about its construction, so others can recognize the blueprints when they appear again. Today, the Society for Historical Truth continues. Headquarters in Berlin, chapters across Germany, archives preserving thousands of testimonies, educational programs reaching millions of students. At its entrance stands a memorial, bronze plaques listing names. Not victims, those are remembered elsewhere. These plaques list perpetrators who chose to testify, Germans who faced truth and refused to let Germany forget. Margareta Hoffman's name is there. Anna Reichert's is there too, with dates and the single word, overcome. Helga Schneider, Petra Vogel, hundreds more who made the difficult choice to remember rather than forget. The memorial's inscription reads, they served evil through small choices. They sought understanding through large courage. They built nothing good, but they preserved truth. May their example teach what their actions never should have required, teaching that conscience demands constant vigilance, that evil begins in ordinary choices, and that the only redemption for complicity is ensuring memory outlasts denial. Visitors leave stones. Jewish tradition meeting German remembrance. Acknowledgement without forgiveness. Truth without absolution. Because that's what the women learned at Camp Rustin in Louisiana, summer of 1945. That real strength isn't in never falling, it's in refusing to pretend you didn't fall. That honor isn't in never doing wrong, it's in facing wrong and testifying to its nature. That redemption isn't about deserving forgiveness, it's about ensuring truth survives. Those women came to America with contempt in their hearts and iron in their spines, believing they were superior, believing they'd served greatness, believing defeat was temporary and ideology was eternal. They left with something harder to carry, but more valuable, to preserve the weight of truth. The burden of knowledge, the obligation to remember. Germany built its Reich with hatred, with propaganda, with lies about superiority and destiny and racial purity. But it's remembered now with truth, painful, necessary, eternal truth, preserved by people like Hoffman and Helga and Petra, by survivors like Rachel, by soldiers like Freeman and Mitchell, by historians and educators and ordinary people who choose memory over forgetting. The camps were built to silence voices, but voices persist. Testimony survives. Truth outlasts denial. If you believe these names deserve remembering, share this story. Write a name in the comments, a victim. A survivor, you've met a person. History forgot, but whose memory you carry. Because memory is the only victory the dead can claim. And preserving memory is the only redemption the living can offer. They taught this lesson in Louisiana, summer of 1945. 32 German women who learned that being better isn't about marching straighter or fighting harder. It's about having the courage to face truth when truth destroys everything you believed, and then carrying that truth forward so others might learn without repeating. That's the lesson they carried home. That's the lesson we carry still.